Hi, everybody, and welcome. Today we are talking about how to put together a great introduction. We've got a couple of materials here that you're going to need to have available to you to write your great introduction. And I'm going to show you a specific model, and if you're interested in a couple of other models, I'm happy to show you those as well. But I want to first talk about the idea of an academic introduction because I think we've been misled by a lot of people because so many of us have been told that the introduction is meant to hook the reader. And that's actually not the case at all. The introduction is meant to show the reader what you're planning to talk about so he or she can decide whether or not it's of interest or worth their effort to actually continue with this material, because you could talk about a topic that they're interested in but be taking an approach that they don't care about, or you might be talking about something they don't think they're interested in but take an approach that they are interested in seeing how you work it. So there's a very different approach to it. What I want you to think about instead is the last time you actually read something because you wanted to know what was in it. Chances are good you don't remember what the first line of it was. So think for a moment about say an instruction manual, or did you read a vacation brochure or directions to put together a piece of furniture? It didn't start with a hook. It didn't start with some sort of elaborate story. In fact, if you think about the last time you pulled up, say, a recipe online, chances are even better that their attempt to hook you with a cute story about the tuna noodle casserole they made was actually really quite annoying because it got in the way of what you actually needed to find. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to talk about a method. This is called the standard form introduction. And this is a structure that many academics use in writing their own research papers, so much so that I often will have students bring in their own peer-reviewed articles, and we can go through the articles and find where they go through these steps to put together a great introduction. So what you're going to need for today is your database. What you're looking at right here is the database that I showed you earlier. So this is a database of my Christopher Titus chapter. So you all are dealing with literature. I'm dealing with stand-up comedy. So these are all quotes that came from a stand-up comedy special called Norman Rockwell is Bleeding. You'll notice that except for this first part, everything else is a direct quote. Unless we have a little note here, but this is all ready to go. So these are all quotes that I can copy and paste directly into my document whenever I need them. Say I'm using them as evidence in a paragraph, or if I'm doing something else with them, I have this ready where I can move it in from there. And I think here, I've got a misspelled word, so I'll work on that at some other point. Here's what we have here. This is the structure of a standard form introduction. Let me talk you through the different steps. So we have the arrows here are going to tell you step by step. There are 3 pieces you're going to need. The red is a description of what the section should do. And then the black is what the paragraph actually includes. So at the end of this, we're going to delete the red and the arrows, and we're going to be left with a really great introduction. I'll be honest with you right now, I don't know how we're going to set up this introduction at this minute, but this video is only 15 minutes long at most. I'm already 3.5 minutes in. It's going to take me about 10 minutes to put this together, and it's going to be a better introduction than I think we realize at this point. So what I want you to know here is that it doesn't take a lot of time if you know exactly what you're trying to do, but it's hard to understand what it is you're trying to do if I just say don't use a hook and then don't give you a model to replace it with. So this is the model. You'll notice here that we've been building from this central question from the beginning. So from the beginning of these modules, we've been working with our central question, and everything comes from that. The central question is how we set up and found material. That was the net we used to find our evidence material. And now it's really going to be the heart of our introduction. So that's the central question. I also want you to know that this is called a problem statement, sort of synonymously. And if I were to make this a statement, so if I said this comedian clearly addresses manhood in unique ways, that's a problem statement, because what it highlights for us is that there's something weird about what's going on that we need to talk about. So now we have our thesis is going to be the answer to this question. We don't know what that is just yet, or maybe you do at this point actually. So many of you have been writing your papers and you may have a clear sense of what this looks like. What I like to tell students for this part of the process is to use what I call a Facebook thesis. So if you're writing your introduction before you've gotten through your paper, that's okay, but you don't want to be married to a thesis just yet. Instead, what you want is to be open to the idea that your thesis could go anywhere. So your evidence as you're answering this question can explore the many ways in which this is a complicated answer. So my Facebook thesis here is it's complicated. So the answer to this question, how does this comedian address manhood in his material? It's complicated. And now as I'm going through, my job is to prove all the ways in which this is complicated. And then at the end of my paper writing process, I'm going to come back up here and offer a far more specific answer about why it's complicated. But for right now, it's okay. Now, notice we're working kind of out of order. We started in the middle, then we went to the end, now we're going back up to the beginning. This is really helpful because what we have is a process by which we now are working our way back to the background information. What we are going to do is build to our question. Our job is just to show our reader that we need to ask this question. That's it. We're not trying to hook them. We're not trying to get them brought in on this. We're not trying to excite them. That doesn't really matter because if they know that we're going to answer a question they need the answer to, we're going to keep watching. I think about this a lot when I pull up a YouTube video, when I need to learn how to change spark plugs on my car, or how do I get gum out of a specific shirt that I dropped a piece of gum on, or how do I make a cake. Any number of these things. I don't really need them to, I don't need them to excite me and say, listen, cakes are the best things ever and you're going to love them. Instead, what I need them to do is tell me exactly what they're going to do so I know if this is going to be useful to me. So the best YouTube videos, for example, open with a line that's kind of boring. Hey everybody, today I'm going to show you how to change the spark plugs on a 2009 Honda Element. That's it. I know I need to keep watching. If they say, hey everybody, I'm going to teach you how to change the spark plugs on a jet ski, I don't need to know that because I don't have a jet ski and I can quit watching at that point. So hooking your reader is not necessary. Instead, what we want is for them, we want to work our way to this question. And the way that we work to this question is we're going to do a model that I call a question raised by the exhibit. There are a couple of other models that you can take, but they require far more work on some other levels, and we'll make separate videos that complement this later. But for right now, all you're going to need for this model is your exhibit material. This is your exhibit. It's also called primary material by many professors. I call it exhibit material. And there will be a separate video later that explains that if you're really interested in it. But for most of you in this class, it's not really going to make a huge difference. So what we're going to do is we're going to look over just this page here, and we're going to try to find some way in which this comedian is dealing with masculinity or manhood in a unique way. That's all I need to show, is that this comedian is doing something different, doing something unique, so that we need to ask, what's he doing with manhood that's so interesting? So for instance, here we have, I'm noticing that father shows up quite a bit. We've got parent, we've got father here, we've got drunk father, we've got mother, so we've got parents showing up here. We've got the idea of there's drinking here, one-step program here. We've got the idea of mental patients, right? We've got the idea of alcohol again. We've got dysfunction and functionality. We've got a living room, that's the sort of set. So why don't we work with that idea of the living room, right? So let's take this piece here, even with our little typo in it, and we're going to say so here, let's go ahead and keep text only. Set looks like a living room. We don't need this part here with no furniture other than a chair. And so what's interesting, the set's left side is orderly and neat, but the right side has holes in the wall, molding and tiles ripped from other places, and a picture of a tidal wave hung askew. So what we have here is we're starting to draw in on this idea that there's this sort of a separate space. There's the divide in the living room. If you don't know Norman Rockwell, by the way, you should Google some of his pictures. Actually, let's do that right now so you can kind of get a picture of it. Norman Rockwell is an important American painter. And what he did was a lot of sort of Americana domestic spaces, a lot of sort of what the world would look like in an ideal setting. So Norman Rockwell often would have pictures like this with like happy kids. They're often white kids doing things that are cutesy or really Americanish, if you think about that Americanish. So here, what we can do is we want to start addressing the fact that there's obviously a tie to this notion of being the perfect American. So here, there's something wrong with it, right? So here, so what we're getting here is we're starting to develop the idea that there's a problem, and what we're trying to do at this point is turn it to our topic, right? We're trying to get to this idea of manhood, and so we've got this whole idea that's kind of building from there, from this idea of the space. Now notice we're drawing upon our evidence and we're saying, let's just look at this. We're not turning to say the world does this or we expect this sort of thing. Instead, what we're doing is we're only working in the boundaries of what we have in front of us, which is that database. If you don't have it in the database, don't use it to get to the question, because you're going to borrow a lot of trouble and you're going to bring in information that's not quite right. Let's go back to our notes here, and we're going to find something that shows that this connection is this connection exists. Let's say here, he says, "I heard that every day. Quit being a wussy." That's one of his sort of catchphrases. So notice here, this is what we've got. We've got this whole passage, and what we've done is we've drawn upon our notes to get to the point to say, look, there's clearly something unique that's going on. And what's unique is that he's tapping into the idea of American, what it means to be an American, what it means for gender norms. Keep in mind, he's in a home, and the home is often sort of this feminized space, but in the middle of the home, there's just a chair. It's not working. And that also leads to the idea that the perfect American home is really in disrepair. And that leads to him questioning his own manhood, because he keeps hearing this refrain, "Quit being a wussy," that's coming from his father. So it's showing that this breakdown is happening on gendered boundaries. So we've got our background information that gets us to this problem statement, and then it's complicated. And what we can do there is say that now we've got a better sense, and if we were developing this paper, we'd see it. Something like that. So let's go here. We've got just about 30 seconds to get this all kind of buttoned up. But here, if you notice, we've got our paragraph has come together quite nicely, and this would be a really great introduction to a paper. So take a look at this one here. You can pause the video right now and you can take a look at this paragraph, and what you see is we've got a pretty great introduction that we've built in just a matter of 15 minutes. If you have questions, let me know, but I think this will give you a good start. Take care, everybody. Good luck.